Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LeanTossup CDL betting podcast. We are here to talk about Stage 3, Week 3. We're going to talk about betting odds, betting favorites, just general team stuff about the teams, who's going up, who's trending down, etc. It's going to be a really tough podcast this week. We've got a lot of crazy stuff happening. We are joined here by our very good CDL analyst here, Ryan. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, a lot of news has happened in just the last
Since we started
couple
this call,
hours
yeah.
or a couple minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
since we've started this call, yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. This week is going to be pretty crazy, and if this week's going to be crazy, that means next week's major is going to be crazy. And yeah, hopefully I have a okay read on the games for this week because uh, it'll be chaotic, I think.
Exactly, yeah, and I completely agree with you on that. Again, the crazier this week is, and like how good this week looks in terms of matches, it just means that the major next week, which will start on Wednesday, is just going to be even better. So, yeah, I'm really excited for that. So the news, of course, that you're referring to, and that broke minutes ago, which thank God we start recording at 2 o'clock Eastern time, is that the LA Thieves have basically signed Hook from the Dallas Empire. The Dallas Empire released Hook after they benched him. Thieves have added Hook, and they've actually benched TJ. It was rumored that Florida was going hard after Hook. Apparently, they have lost that. Possibly because the Thieves, I'm fairly sure, are located in Dallas or in Texas at least, and therefore Hook was a lot closer to them. Florida is they don't actually have their own facilities; they're kind of all spread out. So that may have been a factor, right? We don't actually know. Um, but yeah, and then also the other move from yesterday is that Surge have added Decimate to replace Looney. Looney's on the bench now. He may or may not transition to a coaching role, which we'll talk about a little bit more with the game later. But obviously, this is a massive move. TJ has been a good player for them, a pretty consistent player. He has a big name in the league, but Hook obviously is a bigger name in some cases a much um stronger, better overall player in a lot of ways. Ryan, what do you think about this? Do you think this is the right move? What kind of sense are you getting from this team about this? Like, does this seem like a team that's really just trying to add depth and trying to make themselves better, or do you think this is just like, okay, here's a really good player, we're going to add him? What do you think?
First thing that comes to mind, I mean, it's a good move for Thieves, I think. I don't know how many people are out there arguing that TJ is a better player than Hook. So I think that's just a for sure upgrade at the SMG position. But one thing I did think about was Dallas. Like they have a lot of confidence in Fellow if this is what they're doing, and Fellow has looked like pretty solid for them through a couple of matches. Um, but the questions are still there, like, well, if it was Hook in there instead of like if you just left your lineup the same, would you have had better results versus Toronto and versus LAG? So yeah, to me, it says a lot about Dallas and how they view Fellow if they're willing to slot him in and just give Hook away, basically. Now I don't know if they like got cash from Thieves or something, but yeah, this is probably one of the biggest moves we'll get all year. And one other thing that just crossed my mind is Tej is on the bench now. What do you think about Tej to Paris? He reunites with Temp. Now, when he was with Temp, like Thieves were kind of a middle of the pack team, but maybe sub out Classic or Scraps. I'm not really sure, and then pair up Aqua with Tej and Temp, and one of those two like that. That could maybe get Paris going a little bit. They've been struggling lately, although they did win their last match last week. But yeah, like this move, it answers questions about Hook, but it pops up even more questions about TJ and where he might go, what Florida are thinking, because there were rumors like, oh, maybe Hook goes to Florida because, right, they moved out Slacked for Havoc, and that really hasn't changed much for them. So if you bring in a player like Hook, that might help. But Yeah, still a lot of questions. I don't know if we'll get any more answers this week in regards to roster moves. Maybe a team or two make some changes ahead of the major. Maybe London make their 500th move. I don't know. But it's a lot to take in, and I'm just excited to see how these new look teams, specifically Thieves, look in their match this week and in their first couple of matches next week.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the interesting you mentioned, of course, releasing Hook. And I mean, the thing is, I think on some level, if you're like, we're gonna go with Fellow, and we're not gonna go with Hook, I think at that point, if you do, I mean, Hook helped you win a championship, right? So I think at some point you're like, fine, we'll release you, we'll let you play, right? It's a very tough league. There's only 4 slots on a team. Um, it's very hard, and it's not fair when you have a player who's done a lot for you in the past. It's not fair to hold them when like it's just like whatever. Now, to be fair, we don't actually know what Thieves paid. I mean, we saw on Twitter, Krim was complaining about his PC. Maybe that was maybe like, okay, we'll give you a new PC for Krim. You give us Hook, and they're like, yeah, sure, we'll done. That's
Yeah.
great. No, I mean, we'll see. I mean, we don't. Actually, I'm not even sure if we'll ever find out what the price was. But whatever the price was, it's probably worth it for Thieves. I think this makes them a competitor. I mean, um, you've got Nate Shot who wanted to get a team in the league. He got a team in the league, and to be fair, early on in the season, I was really iffy on this roster. I did not think this was the best roster. I questioned Slasher. I actually did question TJ. And now both are gone. So he, to be honest, I gotta get a lot of credit for Nate Shot. When he first built this team, I thought a lot of it was some of it was good, but I thought a lot of it was giving too much credit to past performance at past big names and not enough to the actual analytics of it and kind of the stronger players. And to his credit, and I will say this, they have built a good team now. This is a completely different team. It is a good team, and I think that they've made a lot of smart moves, and I really have to compliment them for that. It,
Yeah, and they already were looking very good. Like you talk
exactly, yeah.
about, since the stage 2 major, Thieves have been one of the best teams in the league, and now you make this move, you assume they get better, but at the very least they should be as good as they have been. So they've sort of raised their floor, I think, and heightened their ceiling maybe a little bit too. Um, they are making a lot of good moves, and yeah, I mean, when we talk about like power rankings, I don't know where to put them, right? Like the whole year they've kind of been like around sixth. And I feel like they got to be higher than that now. But again, it's there are other good teams too. They play New York this weekend. I had that game as, and we'll talk about that. I have that game as a toss up in my model. And, I don't know if I should adjust it one way or the other. I probably won't because we're not quite sure how they're going to look. But you still have a lot of good teams in front of you that you need to compete with. So I don't think this necessarily like catapults them to number one or number two overall, but they've definitely like solidified that they are a top 6 team. And I really, unless the chemistry is not there, I don't see them falling outside that.
Well, this is the thing, right? If you lost to Toronto 3 in the major, you lost to Phase 3-2. You did a good job against Phase, I will give you that. But again, you just couldn't get it done in the search in I think the final search and destroy. And at times they did look kind of outmatched. They beat Chicago 3-1. Chicago kind of looked lost a little bit in that matchup. We got the matchup with Subliners, but I don't think they've played Dallas since. Or did they play Dallas at stage 2? I think they did play Dallas stage 2 major, right?
I believe so. I
Yeah, and then they
believe they
lost,
were
right?
also in the same group in stage 1. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
so
they've played a couple times.
not the greatest record against Dallas either. So I think if you're Thieves, you're like, we're good, but we're not the top yet. And I think this probably pushes them to. Well, I mean, they were in top 6. I think I'm not sure if this makes them. This doesn't make them one. I don't think. I think Phase Ultra are still 1-2, but this could maybe push them to 3. Maybe like a T3 with subliners, in my opinion. I don't know. Maybe.
Chicago's in there for sure. Like,
I
yeah, there are these
yeah.
clusters of teams that are like they're so close. And yeah, if they make a Toronto like run in the major, like, yeah, any of these teams could be the number 1 or number 2 team by the end of next week. So,
Exactly. Well,
it's exciting stuff. Yeah.
yeah, and I think the other thing you talked about is destination for TJ, and it's possible that like Florida, London could try to pick him up. I kind of think for some of those teams though, I feel like they're kind of done at this point, like especially Paris, and like I mean maybe Florida might try and make another change. I don't even know where the problem with Florida is though. There's actually several problems in that roster. But if you're like London or like Paris, maybe. But the problem though is that you're near the bottom of the league. You've made several different roster changes, especially London. Paris has made less roster changes, but we're getting to the point now where we're near the end, and like it's not one roster change isn't going to make you win champs, right? And that's the thing, right? I feel like at a certain point you're like, okay, fine, so we're gonna make a roster. We're gonna pay all this money, make a roster change. We're gonna pay LA Thieves to buy out TJ's contract, and we're gonna make a run at 8th place, and then like what lose 0-2 at champs, right? Like I think for some of these teams, especially near the bottom, I think Surge is doing something because I think Surge actually still has the pieces to make a deep champs run, if or make a run somewhat at champs. But if you're London, if you're Paris, if you're even maybe Florida at a certain point, I think there are so many issues on your roster that it's hard to justify to be like, okay, let's get this one player and this one player will fix everything. And it's just not the case, I think, with a lot of these rosters. I think Paris is like okay, but I don't they're not currently slated to make top 8, but we'll see. I mean, maybe someone makes a play for TJ. TJ also has a lot of connections with he's close friends with Methods. They might team up to do challengers. Maybe some other team picks both of them up. Who knows, right? Like there's lots of different things that this could go. Um, both have connections to Rise though, so there's a decent chance that if there is a Rise team, because before Methods was tied to Toronto and TJ was tied to, well, to the old Optic and to now LA Thieves, but now since both of them have been released, there's nothing holding them back. And even if they were picked up by another team, there's nothing holding both of them back from teaming up next year and going to like a new expansion team. So lots of really cool potential options here on a lot of this stuff. So um, we'll have to wait and see. I don't think we're going to see a change on the other teams this week. I think the Surge and Thieves changes are the only changes we're seeing. Florida lost out on Hook. Will they try to pull the trigger on TJ? I don't know, but we probably won't know about that until at least the stage 2 major, unless at least until the stage 3 major, maybe not even until stage 4. So, but anyway, let's start getting into our matches here. First off, on Thursday afternoon, we've got Minnesota Rocker and LAG. Minnesota Rocker right now on Bet365 is -175. LAG is +125. Minnesota Rocker spread -1.5 +120. LAG +1.5 is -163. Um, for my model, I've got this as basically a toss up. I've got Minnesota as -105 favorite, a 51% favorite. Very, very close match. What do you have on this, Ryan?
Yeah, my model, so these teams are, 8 and 9 in my model, I believe, or 7 and 8, I'm sorry, 7 and 8 in terms of power rankings. Uh, and my model is always high on LAG, so it has LAG as the favorite still, despite losing both of their matches last week. Um, it's spitting out 60-40 right now, but if you sort of take into account recent performance, I think it is basically a toss-up. So that being said, I do think there is a little value on LAG, preferably money line over the spread. Just because you talk about underdog teams against the spread, if they're like a search and destroy, sort of team, that usually that +1.5 doesn't help you a lot. Just because there's a very high chance that they lose every respawn and lose in 4 games. But if they can get to that map 5 and steal one of those respawns, then you like their chances in a game 5. So the money line makes a little more sense. I'm curious to see where this line moves. I would expect it to get bet up on Rocker just because of LAG's recent struggles. And I just feel like most people are just low on them. Like they're not making moves that are well liked by the general public. And they got 3-0 to Toronto. It was close for the most part, and then lost in 5 to Dallas, who are still this team that's kind of hard to put a finger on. So this match it should be really good. I think it should be a closely contested match, and it's extremely consequential for. So right now, just because I do have LAG as a slightly higher favorite than Minnesota, my win projection for them for the end of this stage is a little higher than Minnesota's. I have LAG finishing third most of the time and Rocker finishing fourth. Now, if Rocker win, which I think is expected by a lot of folks, I think you see that flip and you see Rocker probably the favorite to be the 3 seed and Gorilla's the favorite to be the 4 seed. It also depends on how their second matches go because they each have an additional match after this. But a huge match to kick off the week, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think if it goes a game 5, I like LAG over Rocker. Rocker has struggled quite a bit in Search and Destroy, and I still have LAG as a top team in that game mode. Um, and yeah, for the hard points and the controls, those should all be closely contested. I think Rocker are for sure a favorite in the control, no matter what map it is. But the hard points I could see splitting. LAG probably wins their map pick, and Minnesota wins theirs. So it should be a really good series. We get Silly and Assault versus their old team. So that's an interesting little storyline. And yeah, purple versus purple. That's cool, I guess.
Yeah, who's gonna be the white team?
Right.
No, I mean, I mostly agree with what you're saying. I think though, when you mentioned the point about about the if you there's a good search team, the betting the 1.5. I don't actually hate the betting the 1.5 on this one because Minnesota has at times been horrible hardpoint teams, and if people are going to
True.
point to the fact that they beat Toronto in the game one hardpoint, but Toronto has also been pretty horrible in game one hardpoints too. I think for the like the last part of the stage 3 major, they lost like on the Sunday of it, they lost all 3 game one hardpoints. Like my model has them as very bad at game one hardpoints, and if you're looking at actually, they probably should have lost like the game one hard point Florida. They were in bad shape against. They also probably should have lost it against Dallas too. They were in a horrible shot. They came back from it in a massive comeback, but still though, like game one hard points are pretty bad. At game four hard points though, Toronto's amazing. So, but Minnesota's had issues with hard points, and again, if LAG just steals either a hard point or a control from Minnesota, and the search and destroy, which is what we think, like it's very possible LAG goes up 2-0 after the first 2 maps. So like I don't hate the plus 1.5, minus one
Yeah, I
sixty.
don't hate it either. I'm just saying, like, if you're assuming that they get that scenario, then just bet them to win the game 5 as well. Just take that extra little value on the
That's
money
true.
line.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're a little more cautious, like I get the plus 1.5 too. I think both are valuable bets that I think make sense waiting for because again, I expect Rocker to get bet up.
Yeah, but
So
we actually already have that because I sent you the lines on Friday I think it was Sunday night actually, the first lines that came out, and the lines were -120, -120. So LAG has already flipped the board,
yeah,
and they're already on +125. So we're and that's still like it doesn't go plus one. It doesn't flip instantly at +120. It'd be like -120, -110, +100, +110, +120, plus. So like it's actually gone a lot of different pegs there. So this line has already actually moved. I'd wait until tomorrow, maybe early Thursday, to bet it. You may eat like I don't think we're gonna get the +1.5 at plus money, but like it could be like -1. We could get that to like -120 depending on how much money comes in on Rocker down the stretch.
right, right,
So
right.
definitely something to look at for that one. All right, moving on to the next one. And this is probably the even bigger game on Thursday. Optic Chicago versus New York Subliners. Now, my model has actually thinks this is pretty fairly priced. My model has this as Optic -134, 57% win chance. The betting line has Bet365 has Optic -163, New York +120. Optic spread -1.5, +162. New York Subliners spread +1.5, -225. I've got it about that on my model. I don't like that at all. I want to take New York here. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, my model's pretty close to yours. I have Chicago at a 64% chance to win. Now, again, mine doesn't take into account recent performance, so you adjust for that, right? Because New York has looked good with Hydra. Chicago, not so great last week, losing in 4 maps to LA Thieves, pre-Hook LA Thieves. So, you take that into account. It should be maybe a 60-40 for Chicago, but I do think Optic should be the favorites, largely due to the part because their search and destroy is all of a sudden one of the best in the league. I don't think they're Toronto or LAG yet in terms of how good they are at that mode, but they are pretty good, and New York are not so good. And people talk about how Hydra has helped subliners quite a bit since he's joined, and there's no doubt that he has. But the one area where the team seems to struggle the most is search and destroy, and that makes a lot of sense. Bringing on a new teammate, one who has English as his second language, so uh, trade callouts can maybe be a little trickier in search for that. Just trying to figure out how Hydra likes to play in search. I'm sure there's growing pains with that. So I think Chicago clear favorites in any search and destroy. And then you talk about the hard points and the controls. I think they're pretty much toss ups either way you go. So because of that, you kind of have to have Chicago as the favorite. Now, the price where it is now, I'm not really seeing value anyway to bet it, money line or against the spread. I think there's a really good chance this goes to a game 5, but again, it wouldn't shock me if Chicago come out and win in 4 or lose in 5 or get swept or anything. It's really hard to predict this one. So I don't know if I'll be betting it, but I will for sure have a close eye on it. And yeah, we talked about last match being very important for Group A. This match is equally as big, right? Chicago and New York both with 2 wins, and both with 2 games yet to play. So this is a huge game for tiebreakers. And honestly, whoever loses this could be sent to the losers bracket. Right now, for Group B projections, I have New York as the team in the 4th seed. Obviously, a win over Chicago would flip that. So they'd be probably looking at 3 seed or 2 seed. But either of these teams could be the 1 seed. Either of these teams could be the 4 seed. It's very chaotic in Group B. But this game will give us a clearer picture of how important the matches are for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point to note. Right before we start recording, we mathed out all the scenarios for Group B, and I think because there's two one Thieves are at 3-1, Optic, Atlanta, and Subliners are all at 2-1. And there is any number of combinations in which any number of these teams, like all 4 of those teams could end up in the 4th seed. I think all 4 of those teams could actually end up in the 1 seed too, if I'm not mistaken. Um, so yeah, so the thing is, if in terms of this game, actually this game won't affect any standing. I don't think technically not, but I think if the subliners do win, I think Thieves are guaranteed a slot in the winners bracket, I believe.
Yeah, because they beat FaZe and they would have beaten Chicago.
Yes. So for Thieves to end up in the
Yeah.
losers bracket, Optic would have to win this game against the subliners. If not, if the subliners do beat Chicago, Thieves are guaranteed. Now again, Thieves completely control their own destiny here. They are not. They are perfectly within. They control their own destiny. They're not. Even if the subliners do lose this game, just because they're not guaranteed a slot in the winners bracket doesn't mean they don't control their destiny. They win, they're in. But that being said, though, it'd be a lot nicer if subliners were to gift them a nice little win here. It'd be great for them. But again, that's just going to be a crazy group, though. I don't know. This Optic team did not look really look really bad that um against that Thieves team last Sunday night. I can't get over how bad that looked. Like they almost came back a game with checkmate, but why are you playing check like the and this is the thing we love. Like everybody's like when Optic loses a game, we all like start deeply analyzing their map pick choices. And like but why like like Thieves are really good at checkmate. Like I don't know why you're playing Thieves on checkmate.
I mean, Chicago were undefeated. Like I don't blame them for picking checkmate. They were 6-0, I want to say. They lost by 45 points, which is
And it could
a
have been,
pretty
it could
close
have gone
game.
the other
It's
way.
one hill essentially that they lost by. So
It's even less than that.
I don't.
If they had
Yeah,
contested the hill, the plane point for a little bit, like if they had been able to hold it for the whole time, then it's even less than just a hill, right? Like that was, it was really close. It was really close. But
I think Chicago just they lost in 4 maps. I think that last map that they played maybe skews people's perceptions of how bad they lost by. They got blown out on Apocalypse in game 4. So I think that sticks with people. If you go game by game, like a 45-point loss on Checkmate versus a good Checkmate team, like that happens. You win Search and Destroy on Express 6-3. That's a pretty impressive win if you're winning in 9 rounds or less. Control, they lost in a round 5 on Raid, another one of their good maps. And then they get blown out on Apocalypse, which is a map that features a lot of blowouts. It's weird. Apocalypse is such a weird map because you either get blown out or it's like super super close.
yeah, it's either a blowout or within 20 points.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the public perception of that loss is worse than it actually was. And yeah, Thieves are a good team. Like it was definitely in the cards that Chicago might lose to them, and they did. So if that means we're going to get some value with them against subliners on Thursday, then I'll take it. Because I do think people might, although there is that optic kind of bet up that happens every time, like, it wouldn't shock me if New York, start to get a few more bets. Their recent performance is inspiring a lot of confidence in people. So by the start of this match, it wouldn't shock me if this is closer than like minus 160 plus 120. Maybe it's minus 140 even money, something like that. We'll see. But I'm so excited to see this match.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, the control though shouldn't have been as close. Like I've because like New York went up 2-0, and then they just couldn't close it out. I mean, Optic should have probably won the second round, but then they didn't. And then Thieves probably should have won one of the other rounds, but then they also just didn't, and it went to 5. But then the fifth one was a blowout. So I don't know. It's tough to say exactly. I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan. I don't hate the idea of like an LEG plus 1.5, subliners plus 1.5 parlay for Thursday. I don't think that's horrible. We'll have to see. I don't know. I'll think about it. But I don't like betting either the money lines for Optic or New York subline. I don't like either of those. I kind of want to stay away from those. I just kind of want to bet the plus 1.5. So we'll see. I'm not. I don't know. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you think there's any value in the subliners spread if you think this is going to Game 5?
I see a little more value on Chicago. But if you're going to bet New York, I think the spread makes a little more sense than the money line. But either way, if you have that much confidence in New York, I think it is a viable bet to make. If you are going to bet both the LAG Minnesota match and the New York Chicago match, I don't hate if you're an underdogs guy to just kind of bet straight up LAG plus 125 or whatever it gets ballooned up to, plus 150 maybe, and then just make another single bet for New York plus 120 or wherever that lands as well, and just hope that one of them wins. That could be an idea, but I'm not one to parlay a lot of stuff. I kind of like to separate all my bets and see where the chips fall. But yeah, no, I don't hate the New York plus 1.5 one bit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so now Friday afternoon. This is going to be a fun one. Atlanta FaZe versus Seattle Surge. Now, on Bet365, Atlanta FaZe is minus 700 to win. Seattle is plus 400 on the money line. Atlanta FaZe minus 1.5 is minus 250. Seattle Surge plus 1.5 is plus 175. Interestingly enough, though, if you look at Bodog, which is a different betting site and one which has, in my opinion, a somewhat infamous well, from what I've discovered at least, it seems to be a somewhat infamous curse on CDL lines. For example, on Bet365, you can bet any team spread. You can bet anything from minus 2.5 to plus 2.5 on any team in any match. I mean, sometimes, obviously, for Atlanta FaZe, if you were to bet Atlanta FaZe plus 2.5 against Seattle, you're paying like minus 10,000 or something. But in terms of Bodog, they only offer one spread. They pick the spread that they have that's the closest odds, and they give that one to you. And whenever they pick a spread that's -2.5 on a team, whenever a team is so favored in a match that their spread line is -2.5, almost every single time they offer a -2.5, if you take the +2.5, it cashes. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. It's not like Bodog has anything specifically sinister about them. It's just the fact is that when Bodog says, oh, actually, I'm just on my Bet365 now. The subliners, Thieves subliners line has been pulled. Wow, that's that's rare for COD. That's kind of cool. We'll get to that one in a
Yeah.
second, but
Wow.
usually that's associated when like a starting quarterback goes down with injury. But wow, that's kind of that's special. Wow. Okay. But anyway, we'll come to that one in a second. Thank God we have the picture from 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 Sunday. But no, usually when a team is so favored that the line that Bodog's offering is a -2.5, it's because one team is such a big favorite. And obviously, no one here is going to say Seattle should be favored in this match. But generally, when one team is so favored over another team, either one that the team that's so favored thinks that just kind of blows off the match and just thinks it's going to be an easy win, or the other team is like so heartened the fact that no one thinks that they can win that they actually end up pulling off an upset. So generally when you see that -2.5 line on Bodog, generally it's an indicator that people think the other team has no chance of winning, and that's when you bet that other team. So that's why I really like the +1.5 spread on Seattle. Seattle just took they benched Looney and they've added Decimate, who should be an upgrade on SMG. um, Atlanta has struggled recently. They were supposed to put they also had a -2.5 last week against the London Royal Ravens, and they took them to game 5 on that one. So I'm not particularly taken with this Atlanta team right now. There was a long period last year when Atlanta just kept beating teams 3-2. Every match is 3-2, 3-2, 3-2. And then they won whole tournaments that way. But still though, through that time period, if you bet the +1.5 on the other team, which I did sometimes, then you made money. And like that, like if a team's even if the team keeps winning, you just keep betting the spreads, the opponent team spreads, and you can still make money off that. That seems like a good investment. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I this match is tough. I honestly don't know if I'm gonna bet it at all. Because we talk about right roster moves help teams generally speaking. Now, Decimate's a good player. He played a little bit for the LA Gorillas last year and was one of their better players, I thought. I'll be interested to see how he performs with Seattle. But, we talk about Looney's struggles, and yeah, it felt like they needed to make a change, and they did. Now, what you lose with Looney, I think, is a little bit of play calling, um, which might be for the better, right? Because Seattle have been one of the worst teams in the league, so maybe the play calls were not good, and his gun skill was not good. So you might get an upgrade in both if Decimate starts calling out a little more. I expect that to maybe go the way of the other three, specifically probably Pristini and Octane are going to be probably the in-game leaders most of the time. Um, but this is tough, man. Every week I talk about Seattle and their struggles in control, and I think people overlook that every time we talk about a match. You can basically chalk it up as an L unless for some reason they decide to play Garrison. Seattle, I believe, are like 3-3 on Garrison for the year. Let me pull up their control records. Yeah, they're 3-3 on Garrison. According to my stats, they're power ranked 6th on that map and mode. So about a league average team. On the other two, they're 0-3 on Checkmate, which is 11th out of 12. And on Raid, they're 0-7, which is, again, 11th. I don't know who's worse than them. I don't know how you can be worse than 0-7, but that's what my model
Yeah,
spits
how
out.
how
So
can you be worse
you
than
just
Owens? Yeah, that
Oh
who?
and 7. Now my model takes into account how much you're losing by. So there might be a
Oh,
team
okay.
that is like 0-1 and they got blown out 3-0 or something. But yeah, 0-10 on Checkmate and Raid. You just play them on one of those maps. Now, Decimate might help with the respawns a little bit, but you're going up against FaZe, who are arguably the best team in control. I have them as the number one power ranked team in control. Uh, Third on Garrison. So if they do want to play Garrison, better than Seattle. They were 6th. Third on Checkmate, and first on Raid. So I think we probably expect to see a Checkmate control here. Um, And honestly, you chalk that up as an L, I think. Now, if you're Seattle, you got to win 3 out of 4, which means you have to win at least one hard point. Atlanta are the best hard point team in the league. Despite their struggles recently, they've kind of kept that steady, how good they are at hard point. They're winning 2/3 of their games and they're blowing out the competition. They do have a couple of maps that are a little worrisome. Apocalypse isn't great for them. I do think they'll start vetoing that more. Um, Checkmate, they're 3-3 on, but you talk about Garrison, Moscow, and Raid, power ranked 1, 1, and 2. Got to play them on one of those at least. It's tough, man. I do think Seattle improved with the roster move, but this is not the team. I don't think you want to try that out on right away. Um, so I'm expecting a 3-0. Now, if my model doesn't wait for recent performance, and Atlanta has been worse. So maybe it's a 3-1, and maybe that plus 2.5 cashes for Seattle if you want to bet that. But again, you got to lay a pretty decent price to bet that anyway. So it's tough. I think it's such a mismatch that it's just not bettable. You're just not getting enough return on investment on anything you bet, unless you bet like Seattle to sweep at whatever the heck that would be. But I'm not going to do that anytime soon. So yeah, I I just I just don't have a lot of confidence in Seattle. I haven't all year, and it's largely due to control. Hard point they've been okay at. Search and destroy they've been okay at. Um, but again, you might get a little worse at search when you bring in a new player. There's all that strategy and play calling and stuff that you kind of take a step back on, and um, we'll see. One of these days, I expect Atlanta to just come back to their stage one form, and it very well could be this match.
That's possible. One thing I will say though is that, and we look back at the results of this. The last time, this is the first time this year that FaZe and Surge have played. The last time they played was in kind of the middle of last year, and in that match, Surge went up 2-0 against Atlanta, and then there was a 45-minute stream delay because either the stream crashed, or I think the stream crashed multiple times. So then they had to delay it by 45 minutes, and then Atlanta came back with the reverse sweep. Also, surprising no one, Atlanta was a massive favorite in that game too. So, will history repeat itself? I don't know. I like and honestly, if there was no team change in Seattle, I would say the same thing. I'd be like, yeah, okay, fine. But there has been a team change. We don't know what Decimate's impact on respawns will be. Also, Atlanta is pretty good at garrison control too, so maybe they don't veto garrison. Maybe like because they were really good at it. They lost it to in London, I think they played it on. So maybe they're like, okay, we need to work on that, or maybe they just take the free win and like, fine, we're just gonna play Seattle on like raid or something, and then, or maybe they like, so what? Seattle would veto raid, Atlanta would veto garrison, so it's probably gonna be either garrison or checkmate. So
Yeah, and again, so this match worries me a little bit because I Atlanta needs it, right? They win out there in winners bracket, and if this was stage 2 or stage 1 and they were like 3-0 at this point playing Seattle, who are bad, then I think you get in a creative Atlanta that vetoes different stuff just to try other things. But I think they know, like, let's win the vetoes and let's just come out and 3-0 these guys because we need the win. So it's tough. But again, yeah, roster changes for Seattle. That Decimate could be very good. Now, again, we saw him last year and he was fine. Um, so I don't know how much of an upgrade he'll be, but maybe they take it to map 5. I would be very impressed if they just got it to a map 5, to be perfectly honest. So, um, not a hugely consequential game unless Seattle upset them, but yeah, I don't know. It's going to be tough.
yeah, we'll see. So that will be an interesting one to take a look at too. Also, that one has a chance of moving a little bit as well too. People might, because like that usually values kind of get up with Atlanta, the big favorites. They should get up to about the -1,000 range, and they still got, that's on Friday, so you got a couple days to bet that one up. Next one up, Dallas versus Florida. Dallas is -188 on the money line. Florida is +137. Dallas -1.5 is +120. Florida +1.5 is -163. My model has this as about right. I got Dallas as a -132 favorite. So that's about right. Um, I kind of think this is about what you'd expect. If it was Hook, I'd say I'd bet Florida, but it's not. Hook is not on Florida. He is now on the Thieves. So I kind of like Dallas here, and I don't even hate Dallas minus 1.5. What do you think?
This one's a stay away from me, I think, unless one side gets bet up a crazy amount, but I don't expect that to happen. Um, I prefer Dallas on the minus 1.5 spread slightly to the money line. You talk about game mode by game mode. Dallas versus Florida in a hard point should go the way of Dallas. They are still one of the best teams in that mode. Florida, it's been probably their worst mode all year. I think the search and destroys and the controls are a little more of a toss up. Both teams pretty mediocre to below average at search, and both teams, middle of the pack ish in control. So I think we've got a decent series on our hands. Florida are just such a tough team, man. They are very inconsistent. The Havoc move, I don't think moves the needle one way or the other. Um, and Dallas, if anything, again with the Hook move, it shows a lot of confidence in Fellow. I just don't know. It's a pretty important game for Florida, all things considered. If they want to make winners bracket, they pretty much need this game. Dallas, it would hurt their chances of making winners if they lose. But yeah, all in all, I expect a Dallas win. Maybe it goes to a game five. I think even if it does, I would still take Dallas. But um, yeah, just I don't know. This might be the least interesting game of the week for me, just because Florida are kind of a whatever team, right? They're just in the mix. You don't really know what you're going to get. And same thing with Dallas. We're still just kind of waiting to see how Fellow performs. We just need more games from him, I think.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, Florida, Dallas obviously made the change, and then they got immediately 3-0'd by Toronto. But Toronto is one of the best teams in the league. Last week, they were able to 3-1 Paris, which was really good for them. And they showed some strength there. And Florida, I think, has a lot of problems. I think if Florida brought in Hook, that would be a start. And I think obviously it'd be Havoc that would get the boot for that. But like this team is just so inconsistent, and I think when you're looking at like people, like everybody keeps saying like there's all the memes online about Big Wake, and like that's fine and they're cool and stuff, but Awakening sometimes has really bad hardpoint games. Like that's people love talking about him in Search and Destroy, and he's really good in Search and Destroy, but sometimes he will have a very bad hardpoint game, and that will doom them far more than being really really good in coming up clutch in like a 3v1 in Search, right? Sky's also not having a great year. He's basically batting even in a lot of maps, sometimes even lower. Neptune inconsistent as well. He's not doing great. I mean, the thing is, last year the Florida team at one point was the best team in the league. We all remember that the 3-0 against Atlanta phase in that final, and that the absolute blowout of a domination on Hackney Yard. We all remember that. We all remember that like 10 minutes. But the thing is though that like if you basically have a bunch of people who every time they play they're a die roll as to how well they'll do, then a lot of the times, yeah, sure, you can get a time when you 3-0 phase and you beat them by like 100 some odd points in a Hackney Yard domination. But then also if each piece is so inconsistent, and then you go to the next year you lose some of those pieces, right? Like you've lost you Pharaoh obviously sadly passed away, and obviously Frosty went on to play Halo. You now have the team is just not consistent, and there's just not enough consistency in getting that team back to those highs. And there are multiple problems in this team. Like you can make the case to basically bench anyone except for probably Awakening just because he's so strong in Search. But even then, like the pressure needs to be taken off of him in hard points, and there's too much when everybody else is underperforming in hard points when they're not getting those kills. He has to kind of go crazy in hard points, and I just don't think he can. It's kind of similar to Octane in that way. I think Awakening in hard points. So I think I think like a lot of problems need to be on this. Like there needs to be a lot of fixes on this team, and you can make a case for pretty much benching any of them. You can make a case for Awakening. It's not a strong case, but they're like the Florida team has a lot of issues, and I don't think they're gonna take down. I don't think they're gonna take down Dallas this week. I don't think they are. So
Yeah, I one more thing to add on with Florida. Anytime we get a listen in with them in a game of hardpoint, it is, in my opinion, some of the worst comms in the league. They are so talkative. It's like I don't know what anyone is saying because Skies is just calling out literally everything he sees. They're all just like they just get rushed. I feel like I think the slower the game mode, the better they can play. But yeah, you get them in a hard point on a fast map, and it is problematic. They just need to kind of have a Toronto approach to comms. You listen to Toronto and comms, and it's like so clean and calm and one person talking at a time for the most part. You listen to Florida, and it's just chaos, and it's hard to listen to, honestly, sometimes. So I think they just need one or two guys to call out a lot of stuff. I think Neptune's doing a good job, just kind of like he gives his call outs, but he's been pretty quiet for the most part. But now you've got Havoc, who likes to be an in-game leader. Awakening likes to call out everything, and Skies, I think, views himself as kind of the captain of the team. You got all these guys talking over each other, and it's just a headache. So I think they need to slow down. I think they get rushed way too much, and play on those slower maps. Play on a Moscow, play on a raid. Um, and their search is good enough where they can win in that. And controls kind of that in between mode of, it's not super fast paced and it's not search. Um, but yeah, until we see that change, I think Florida are just going to be a really hard team to judge.
yeah. So, all right, moving now on to Saturday. And we've got the first match of Saturday. The afternoon match is Toronto versus Paris. Toronto is minus 400 on the money line. Paris is plus 275. Toronto is minus 1.5 at minus 138, and Paris plus 1.5 at plus 100. I'm taking Paris in this. My model thinks this is about right. Actually, my model has Toronto as a minus 279 favorite, which is actually the biggest favorite it has on the board. Even bigger than I have actually Atlanta versus Seattle, which is crazy that this one isn't a minus 2.5 on Bodog. But anyway, I'm taking Paris in this one because when you look at a lot of these games, um, especially like the last game for a team, Toronto was already locked up the number one seed. So they're just kind of playing for fun. Um, and the thing is, when we last saw Paris in a game where they were playing against the seed that had already clinched, it was actually against FaZe in the stage one, and they actually took that one to a game five. Last time when FaZe had pretty much sewn up the number one seed last stage, they played LAG. They lost that game 3-2. Then they ended up 3-0ing London to finish off the stage for them to lock up the number one seed. But they pretty much already sewn it up when they were 3-0 already, because that group was pretty dreadful last time. They actually had Toronto before they became good. But that's beside the point. The point is that Toronto, and we saw this even a little bit with Minnesota. They were starting to experiment. They were playing some maps they weren't as great on. There's no reason for Toronto to not start experimenting on maps on Saturday here. And Paris are playing for their lives. They're trying to get up into winners bracket. I don't know how viable that is, but they want the CDL points, and they actually looked really good against Florida. They had a massive comeback on the hard point. They did lose the search, but they should have probably won the search. They probably should have been a 3-0. But they did really well on the second hard point. They did well on the control too. So yeah, I don't hate Paris here. I think wait a little bit, wait for this to get bet up. I think people will probably bet on Toronto here. This is actually, I mean, it's good value on Toronto money line, I guess, but I really don't hate the plus 1.5 on Paris. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a no bet from me. I think you make a great point about Toronto not really needing this match and Paris needing it pretty bad. And that doesn't mean that Paris is going to win, obviously, but it means that Toronto are going to be creative with their map picks, I think. They're going to want to play on some maps that they've been weaker on. Obviously, the CDL points matter, right? They want to win the match, but I think you're looking to expand your map pool a little bit. And right now, Paris are arguably the worst team in the league. So there's not a better time than now. This is your only match of the week. It's against the worst team in the league. let's see what we can do on some maps we've had problems on. I think that's what Toronto's thinking. So we might get a very favorable map set for Paris. Now, that's not saying a lot because they're bad at a lot of maps, but all things considered, there might be value on them. I think especially plus 1.5, whatever that gets ballooned up to, because yes, I do think Toronto are going to get bet up. Yeah, it's a no bet from me. No matter how it goes. Uh, it's so tough though, because even on a not preferential map set, like Toronto is still a better team than Paris, but we don't know exactly what maps are going to play. Maybe we see an apocalypse from Toronto. They've obviously played that the least out of any maps. They've played that 3 times. They're 2-1. So maybe we see that. Maybe Moscow, again, they've only played that for hardpoint, I should say. Toronto, Moscow hardpoint 1-2 on that map. Maybe they try a little bit of that. It's tough to say, but yeah, it wouldn't shock me if Paris wins, to be honest. They won their last match. Now there was that disconnect with Florida in the game 4, but even then, Paris were the better team. So yeah, I expect Toronto to win, but yeah, don't be shocked in the slightest if Paris at least get it to a map 5, if not win. So
Yeah. So that's one to watch as well. Next one. So this actually went off the board a couple minutes ago. It's back on the board now. I think it was basically even. I think it was like minus 120, minus 120, or minus 120, minus 110 for one of the teams. I can't remember. But now the Thieves Subliners is back up on the board. Thieves are now minus 150 favorite on the money line. Subliners plus 110. So basically same, but a slight, maybe a couple points to subliners there on the money line. Thieves minus 1.5 plus 162. Subliners plus 1.5 minus 225. Yeah, with Hook, I don't know. I mean, it improves the team. Does it improve the team a little bit? Yeah, that seems to be the price we're getting here. Um, I actually had Thieves as a very slight favorite before, which would have agreed with the betting lines. Thieves are now even slightly larger favorite, which is probably correct. I have this kind of priced pretty well. I don't really think there's a huge difference here, but I don't know. Maybe bet this goes to a game 5. I don't know. What do you think?
yeah, I wouldn't hate that. I do. So before the Hook move and all that, I have this match as a 53-47 match in favor of subliners. So already a toss-up match. You add Hook to Thieves, you think that helps them. So it's honestly, it's a true toss-up either way. So I think the way to play this is wait, see where the bets come in. I would think that people would want to bet Thieves. Especially last week. Last week was not great for New York. They lost to London, which really hurt their chances at a clinching winners bracket. So I think that's kind of sticking in people's minds. And we just saw Thieves beat Chicago. So yeah, definitely Thieves are going to get bet up big, which means I do think there's a lot of value to be had on New York, either money line or plus a map and a half. Either way you want to play that, I think is good. So if you really want to bet Thieves, I think bet it as soon as it's available, because that is going to get bet up so much just because of that one loss that New York had to London. And, it's in map 5. London, they're not a great team. But again, it's New York with a new player, working out some kinks, especially in Search and Destroy. It's going to be a really, really interesting match. I hope like if the CDL could move this to the late Sunday match, that would be awesome. Or I guess phase optic, either one would be cool. I can see myself betting
Flex scheduling now.
Yeah, that'd be really cool if they did that. But I can see myself betting New York late, like just before the match starts. But if the numbers right, if the odds don't get as high as I think they're going to get, then it's probably a no bet from me. But yeah, I'm so excited to see how Hook performs, and this is Thieves' only match of the week, so they're really looking to win. If they win, they lock up winners bracket. It's not guaranteed that they're the 1 seed, but they lock up winners bracket, and it hurts New York's chances pretty badly. I'm not sure if they'd be guaranteed losers bracket. I don't think so, but um, it's a humongous match in terms of seeding.
Yeah, this one will be really big, and I actually do like the idea of that, right? So I mean, obviously the Bet365 has already moved this line a little bit. People will see the news on. I mean, that news is an hour old at this point, so people will see that, and then they'll start betting on thieves. That line could get ballooned. We could see like subliners close at like a plus 150 dog,
Yeah, if
and
that's the case, I like
you
just
have to bet
New York.
subliners at that point, I think.
Yeah,
Because it
seriously.
is a brand new team, right? Like I mean, this we're not saying the Thieves team is bad. I mean, obviously we like New York too, but at the same point in time, like it's a new team, right? And Hook will be good on the team, but that there's instantly a problem with search and destroy, right? Because there usually when you get a roster change, search and destroy does hurt a little bit, so that will be an issue right there. So like Hook is going to be a good part of the team, but will they? I mean, they have a couple days to prepare for this now. This is Tuesday, so they're going to have about 4 or so days of practice to prepare. So that's good, but at the same time, like I don't think anybody subliner should be a minus plus 150 dog against anybody, especially if they lose against Optic. Then they really need this game, or if they like, there's a lot of different ways that this could go. So we'll have to see. But anyway, moving on to the next bet here. Florida versus LAG. This one is dead even on Bet365. Florida minus 110, LAG minus 125. LAG is actually the favorite. Florida plus 1.5 is minus 275. LAG minus 1.5 plus 200. I'm just looking at this now. That minus 1.5 is actually kind of pretty attractive there for LAG. I actually have that bet. I have that priced exactly right. Um, that's actually a pretty. That's spot on with with what my model says. Um, I don't know. What's your thoughts on that, Ryan? Do you agree that to take LAG here?
Yeah, yeah, obviously, every time we talk about LAG, I talk about how my model loves them maybe too much, but, yeah, I think those numbers are pretty accurately priced, as of right now. If they were to play, each other, I have LAG as a 63% favorite, and I just think it's a bad matchup for Florida. We talk about both teams are not great at hard point. I have that as about a 50-50 game, on just a generic hard point map. Control pretty similar, both teams. You give the slight edge to Florida, I guess, but it's pretty close either way. And although we talk about how Florida, their best mode is probably search and destroy, um, LAG are one of the best search teams in the league. So I can see an LAG sweep here, and people go like, "Oh my gosh, LAG, what is happening?" Like, don't be shocked if that happens. Um, I do think if LAG wins, it's in a map 5, and if Florida wins, it's in a map 4. But a tough game to figure out, I'd say. And but again, we talk about all these games and their importance in terms of seeding. Uh, this could be who's in third, who's in fourth, who's starting in winners bracket, who's starting in losers bracket. And if you're asking me to pick that, I'll take LAG. But I'm curious to see where the line moves after these teams play their first matches. But yeah, just a tough one to figure out, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. Don't mind sprinkling some money on that LAG minus 1.5. This Florida team just kind of seems a bit hapless. I don't know. We'll have to see. But um, yeah, I don't know. I think it's possible that LG might actually be pretty good. They seem to have improved with Chino a lot, or Cheen as he's now called. So we'll have to see. That could be a very interesting game. And there's definitely gonna be a good game to watch on the Sunday night. Probably would have rather that been Thieves and Subliners on the Saturday night. Sorry, Saturday night. But we're gonna get Florida and LAG. So I don't know. We need the CDL needs flex scheduling. I'm sorry. This the like for the NFL. Sure, I understand the fact of not having like people hating flex scheduling because like if you've bought tickets to a game and then all of a sudden that game is like 3 hours later, obviously like travel plans, if you're traveling across the country and then suddenly the game's later, it could impact it a little bit. Generally it doesn't, but it could impact it a little bit. But like there's no fan like everybody's at some place doing this remotely. There's no fans in the stands. It's just a stream. Like no one cares. Like you can move the games, no one's gonna care. But you
Completely agree.
just
Completely
you
agree.
could just move the order of the stream, like like it just should be changing the order of who plays on stream at which point. Like really not that big of a deal. But
Yeah, think about if you're the CDL, think about how many people you get to watch the second game on Saturday, Subliners Thieves. Like, oh my gosh, you're gonna get a
well,
lot of eyeballs on that. And then Gorillas Mutineers is next. And how many people are gonna leave the stream after they hear that? Like,
well, who
it's
maybe that's the point. Maybe the point is you get maybe actually you know what I'm just realizing now. Maybe that's what they're trying to do. Maybe they're trying to get it so that the bigger game is the middle game, and then it leads to the late game so that they get all the fans in there and they're like, "Oh, do you want to keep watching Call of Duty? Well, there's another game now." Right?
maybe, and it is consequential, right? It's two struggling teams, but it does matter. So I get it from that perspective. I also think the CDL just wants to feature teams in the quote unquote prime time slot throughout the year. I think they want to get everyone in there, right? At least a couple of times. So this might just be the week where it's like, all right, we got to get LAG in one of these late games. Let's throw them in there, or
We're
Florida,
we're
or
we're
whoever they're talking about.
we're running out of primetime slots. We gotta get them.
Yeah.
We gotta get them in somewhere. So
Yeah.
all right, so moving on to Sunday, we've got another dead even match. We've got Seattle versus London. Seattle minus 120, London minus 120. Seattle plus one. So technically, it's weird when you see them dead even odds. So Seattle plus 1.5 is plus minus 250. So technically, they actually think London is slightly favored by this metric because the way that the spread lines go. London minus 1.5 is plus 175. London has actually been playing pretty well here. This seems like an overestimation of Seattle. But that being said, though, if you're factoring in like mean reversion from London, and then Seattle increasing, that's probably what you're looking at here. Um, this seems like a stay away. I don't want to touch this game.
Yeah, I agree. I do have London favored as well, 55%, 45%. Now, again, if Seattle come out and give FaZe a fight, I think Seattle might get a lot of money. But all things considered, this match is pretty meaningless. Both of these teams should start in losers bracket, probably both in losers round one, unless something crazy happens with Seattle beating Atlanta or something. But yeah, it's a basically a toss-up match. But if Seattle looks okay versus FaZe, then I think London are probably a good bet. But I don't expect that to happen. So I think just staying away from this one and maybe betting the other two matches on Sunday is the move. So
Yeah, I mean, unless something massive, like if Seattle beats Atlanta, lol, which would
then
be
then
then
I
there's
don't
value
know
on
what to
London
think.
because then what'll happen is if Seattle does beat London, if Seattle beats FaZe, which London couldn't do last week, then suddenly Seattle becomes a minus like 180 favorite, and like
Yeah,
then you
it
could maybe get some value on the plus 1.5 on London. So we'll have to see. But yeah, no, I this is just so ugly. I don't want to touch this. But I mean, again, if Seattle's good though, maybe you bet. If Seattle does beat FaZe, maybe you just jump in immediately
I
and then
think
bet
the
Seattle
way to
there.
bet Seattle is going to be if Seattle gets 3-0'd, but every map is close. I think because people
Yeah,
are going to look at like, oh, Seattle, they made a roster change. They still got 3-0'd. London beat New York last week. Let's bet London. And it's like, well, I mean, Seattle put up a fight against FaZe. That's all I'm looking for with Seattle. Put up a fight, show some life, take a map. If you can take two maps, I'm going to be ecstatic. But I think that's the one way I can see myself betting Seattle is if it's a 3-0 and they were right there on every map or like at least two of the maps, right? Like you lose a hard point by, 20 or less and you lose in round 11 and in search and we'll see how control
then you get
goes
3 out
obviously,
in
but
rate 3 out in
yeah, and
rate
then,
control. You're
and
like,
then
oh,
yeah, yeah,
Seattle almost won that game. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, probably a stay away. And honestly, like if you don't want to watch this game, if you just want to tune in for the afternoon games, like that's totally okay because these teams are disappointing to say the least.
Yes. So the afternoon games, FaZe versus Chicago. We've got Atlanta FaZe minus 200 the money line, Optic plus 150, Atlanta FaZe minus 1.5 plus 110, Optic plus 1.5 minus 150. This feels a lot like the last. It was like I think it was actually the last game or second last game of stage two when it was Optic versus Dallas. Like Dallas was the favorite, Optic was the dog. People were like, Dallas is good. They can't lose to Optic. Optic pulls out in game five. Optic is a good-ish team. I don't know. I feel like this is a bit overconfident. I think this should be closer. I think people are like FaZe is really really good. Optic isn't as great. My line on this is I've got this 55-45 in terms of Atlanta, so I got this about minus 120 on Atlanta. That's bet up a bit. Um, there's some value on the Optic plus 1.5. I don't hate the money line here either. I don't know. I just think when people think Optic is done and when they count out Optic, that's generally when Optic actually does something. So we'll have to see. I don't know.
Yeah, this line is going to move a lot, I think, depending on what happens with the Chicago New York match on Thursday. Because all things considered, like Atlanta should beat Surge 3-0 or 3-1 most likely. But if Chicago come out and beat New York, I think Chicago's going to get bet up a ton. And if they come out and struggle or lose in a game five, I think people are going to go, well, Atlanta, they crushed Surge. Chicago couldn't even beat New York. Like, I don't know. If the line stays where it is, I do like Atlanta a little bit. You go game by game, and it's actually really interesting. I have Atlanta favored in every game mode, but Search and Destroy is a true toss up. And kudos to Chicago for fixing Search because uh, it's it's been an impressive turnaround. They are one of the best teams at that mode. Atlanta has really, really struggled when it comes to the search and destroys lately. So if Chicago win, I think it's in a game five, which at the start of the year, if you told me like Chicago, if they're winning matches, it's in game five because they're a search team, I'd be like, no, there's no way. But that's kind of what they are now. So I think the path for them is probably like you win your hard point pick and you win both searches. I think Control Atlanta is still pretty solid at that, but yeah, I expect a heck of a match. Super excited for this one. I just think it's so hard to tell right now which way you should bet just because that Chicago New York match matters so much. So if you're really confident in that Chicago New York match, how that's going to go, then I think you can bet this game now. But I don't know how that Thursday game is going to go. So I'm staying away for now and then seeing how the odds adjust come Sunday.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. I love. I mean, we don't do a ton of analysis on in terms of betting lines and keep track of them as where they close. But I love the analysis as to how many times I'm fairly sure every time Optic has lost, they've been the betting favorite. And every time they were the dog, they actually won. I think I'd have to check that because I think the only time they've ever been a dog all season was against Dallas in in that match, just in stage three, and then they lost. And I think that was the last time they were a dog. I think so. It's that's kind of fascinating that the second people count out Optic, that's when they actually win. So my thing on this would be if they beat subliners, don't bet this game. If they lose to subliners, then bet Optic money line. I think that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think I largely agree. Yeah.
All right, now for the last match of the week. This is slowly becoming one of the most heated rivalries.
Seriously, yeah, it
Yeah, this has
is.
actually become like this is an underrated, like huge rivalry in Call of Duty. Dallas versus Minnesota. Like they've had so many game fives. It's like every single time it goes to a game five. Dallas minus 150 on the money line. Minnesota plus 110. Dallas minus 1.5 plus 137. Minnesota plus 1.5 minus 188. This is a challenge to say the least. I've got Dallas as a slight favorite. That could go the other way. I It depends what Minnesota does. If Minnesota loses to LAG, I'm 100% betting on Minnesota. If Minnesota beats LAG, I mean it depends, right? If money comes in on Dallas, which that's what money does, money eventually comes in on Dallas no matter what. If this gets up to like a 200, I think Minnesota is a great play. I think I like Minnesota as the dog here. But it depends. we'll have to see. I don't know. It's going to depend on where that line closes to whether that's bet it or not. But it's going to be a great game. I think maybe betting over 4.5. I'm just looking here over 4.5 plus 150. That seems not terrible at all. So, what do you think?
Yeah, yeah. This is one of those matches where if you're betting the underdog, I actually do like the plus a map and a half. Um, because the search industry, if it gets to that game five, I honestly don't know who's going to win. I guess it's you favor whoever picked the map, but yeah, these teams are neck and neck in search and destroy and in control. I think Dallas are clear favorites in any hard point that they play. That's kind of been despite Dallas's struggles, right, over the last month or so. Their hard points been there for the most part, and Minnesota's has not. So I think if Dallas win, it's probably in 4 maps, and if Minnesota wins, it's probably in 5 if they can go the usual like 2-3-5, which I believe is how they beat Dallas the last 2 times they played them. So yeah, I don't hate Minnesota plus a map and a half. Again, this line will probably move a little bit if we get some unexpected results. Uh, right, Minnesota playing LAG on Thursday, Dallas getting Florida. We'll see how those go. If the favorites win, it probably won't change things much. But um, I don't know. This game just feels so far away, and so much is going to happen from now that it's a tough read for me. I do have Dallas favored about 2/3 of the time, and that's probably a little on the high side just because Rocker, right, have looked a little improved since Standy's joined the team, and Dallas has looked a little worse off since they've had Fellow. But obviously, the first games that each of these teams play will matter a lot. And yeah, we'll see if this matters in terms of seeding. It might for Minnesota, I suspect. I think this is probably a win and you're in winners bracket game for Minnesota. I think Dallas, it could be that for them as well, but they looked pretty locked into the 2 seed at least, or I should say 3 seed at least, probably going to be the 2 seed. Um, I just wish, yeah, this just doesn't feel like it should be the last game of stage 3, right?
It should be Atlanta, Chicago.
Yeah, or that Subliners Thieves match, either of those, I think. But it
Yeah,
is what it is. I think it'll be a good match nonetheless. And yeah, if Minnesota can win, I really think you really start to question Dallas in terms of their decision to bring in Fellow.
yeah. That's the thing. That's so crazy, right? Like when analyzing the team, like the just kind of the look and the feel of the team, it's so crazy that after they got rid of Hook and brought in Fellow, and they just looked like not substantially worse, just a little bit. Like I feel like they just looked like they were a good but not amazing team, like a good but not great team. And then the net effect of bringing in Fellow is just they look slightly worse. And then they're like, yeah, we're gonna. This is good. We're sticking with this. I don't understand the like. Okay, we're just gonna lock ourselves in as slightly worse than when we had Hook, and it's a weird decision to make. It feels like the Philadelphia Eagles. Honestly, that feels like the stuff they do. It feels like this is what the
Yeah,
Philadelphia Eagles would do.
a
But
little bit. And now we don't really see their scrims much, so maybe they're scrimming teams and their results are different, right? We've seen 2 matches with Fellow. It's about as small of a sample size as you can have.
yeah,
But they haven't been great performances, and if that continues, I think if Dallas go 1-1 in their matches versus Florida and Minnesota, I think people are still going to talk about like, is this the right move? Would they have gone 2-0 with Hook? Um, it's so tough, man. It's one of the better storylines in CDL right now. I do trust Dallas. I think they're a good organization. The rest of the players on that team are still good. Illy's had his struggles, but like Shotzi, Krim is one of the better ARs in the league, and Fellow hasn't looked bad. So I think Dallas will still compete with every team throughout the rest of the year. Um, but yeah, we could just get a situation where we're talking about, man, does Dallas regret not keeping Hook? And honestly, at this point in the year, I've asked myself, like, man, does Dallas regret keeping Krim over Clay? Because you look at what Clay's doing with New York, and it's like, wow, it's one of the bigger surprises, I would say, New York being as good as they've been throughout the entire year. I know they had their struggles in the stage 2 major, but outside of that, it's super impressive. So, um, yeah, I don't know, some drama with Dallas, no doubt. Uh, but maybe we'll get more after this week's matches.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting. I think um, I'm really excited to see what Dallas does. I think we only had them in one game I think last week, and they 3-1 Paris, which isn't or no, yeah, it was Paris, right? Yeah, it was Paris. Not the greatest accomplishment. Oh no, sorry, they it was 3-2. No,
3-2 to LAG,
yeah, that was it. So that's not
and
actually
yeah.
particularly. Oh no, did they beat someone or not?
So they had, let's see here. They 3-1 Paris. That was with Hook. They lost game one and then crushed Paris in games 2, 3, and 4. Let's see here. Then they got swept by Toronto,
And then
and that was
3-2 against
with
LAG.
that was with Fellow in the lineup.
Hmm.
It was a close sweep, so there's that. Yeah, and then the LAG series they kind of squeaked by. So yeah, mixed results. I think this week will clear up a lot for that team.
Yeah, not great. So I that's I think the thing I'm looking for the most this week is how does Rocker look? We're gonna get a little bit about Thieves now that they've got Hook. We're gonna see a little bit of that with the subliners. I think Optic is was that did they bottom out against Thieves? Can they come back against like how does subliners look again? People like were so high on them when they took out Phase 3-2. Right, you bring Hydra in, you get them up 3-2, it looks great, right? But at the same time, then you immediately turn around and lose to London, right? And it
Yeah.
was a close 3-2. I went back and rewatched that match because that actually is like kind of pivotal. That game 5, London got really lucky in that search and destroy with a lot of those kills. They were gifted some double kills, which really put pressure on New York. So they probably should have lost that 3-2, but that being said though, shouldn't have gotten there, right? They should have been able to close out like they shouldn't have won the first search and destroy. Like New York has to be better in search and destroy, which is crazy that they're not great at search and destroy right now, but they should have lost. They beat Atlanta in a game 5 search and destroy to get there. Then they didn't close out they did well in the hard point, but they struggle in control. But again, London is actually that's the one good mode they're at. They're good at the game 3. That's big consistent from this year to last year. London was always great in Dom last year. Now they're good at control. Again, completely.
No, 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 no. London game 3 Dom was like a nightmare for London last year.
Oh, was it? I thought they were good at
Yeah.
it. Oh,
No,
okay.
no, no, no. They was always like London would tweet out like game 3 domination on Hackney up next. Oh God, no.
But that
So
was
like they were a good team because they were solid at hardpoint, solid at search, and that's part of the reason why they made it to fourth at champs. But yeah, that game 3 it gets overlooked by some teams this year. It's Surge. But yeah, right now London and Control are like you're liking the results 3-2 over Atlanta on Garrison in their last match, and a 3-1 or I'm sorry a 3-0 against New York on Checkmate. So yeah, good results by them, and we'll see. They have the one match against Surge this week, but again, it's London. We'll see.
yeah. But no, that's the thing. So it's interesting to see how New York will rebound from that. They will probably get better. That was probably kind of a dip for them. We'll see how they perform against Optic. See how Optic does. See how Paris does. Paris had a good week last. They won. They had like an iffy week. They're seeming to be on the rebound. How do they do against Toronto? LEG has 2 games this week. Let's see how they do. They got Florida and they've got Minnesota. Can they 2-0 that? I think it's possible. I would not be surprised to see LEG win both of those games. So yeah, we've got some really good matchups this week, some really interesting storylines, and it's gonna be a really exciting major. This could probably be the best major we've had, I think personally. We've got a lot of teams who are really closely stacked together who are going to be in the same brackets and fighting against each other, and I'm really excited for this major. But we've gone on long enough today. I think that's enough. I think we'll talk about the major next week when we actually get to the major. So, any storylines you're looking for, Ryan, this week, or you think you've said enough?
Yeah, the big ones that jump out to me, right? Right, Thieves, obviously. How do they look against New York? just Group B in general. I'm just really excited to see how that plays out. And then, yeah, ahead of the major, I just want to know how many times a Group B team is going to go up against a Group A team and just stomp on them. Because right now it feels like Group B is so far ahead of Group A in terms of talent. And that was kind of the perception going into stage three was like Group B is actually a group of death. Um, so yeah, I'm just so excited. It's going to be a great 2 weeks of COD, and I'm really looking forward to talking about the major.
Yeah. So we're gonna see. We're gonna see. So thank you, Ryan, for coming on. It's a pleasure as always.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
yep. And we'll see you guys next week, previewing the major and what's gonna happen with that. Have a great week, everybody.